Hi, I'm Michael Bean, and welcome to today's myfreeactingclass.com lesson. You can find a video of all of these lessons, all the ones that I'm teaching anyway, if you go to confidenceoncamera.com. Today we are talking to Jesse James Miller. So let's camera.com. That's where you can find a link to the YouTube channel that's got past lessons, including ones from casting directors, etc., etc. And today we have director and filmmaker Jesse James Miller joining us. Let's start by looking at quickly his IMDb page. So Jesse James Miller, my biography from internetmoviedatabase.com. A uniquely talented, multi-award-winning filmmaker and creator, Jesse James Miller has built a reputation in documentary film as an acclaimed director in the genre. Punk, his latest book, Punk, critical success, his award-winning biodoc, The Good Son, was festival hit, Chasing Evel, The Life of Robbie Knievel. Other credits include AMC, Robert Kirkman's Secret History of Comics, The Truth About Wonder Woman, and his latest film, I Am Richard Pryor, which premiered at South by Southwest and aired on Paramount. He's also written and directed indie film festival winners Becoming Redwood and Rabbit, and there's more there. You can look him up. So maybe what I will do is also put this in the chat window so that if some of you want to multitask, you're like, man, I want to read about Jesse as he talks. There you go. Then if we quickly look at the beginning of his demo. Okay, and by now, let's see if we have Jesse himself somewhere here. No, not yet. Okay, perfect. So we can watch some of the link that he sent me. So he also sent me, he just sent me an email that actually probably...
We think today of seeing an action...
A good idea to just read you his words. He's been focused on documentary film work in the last while. He said, feel free to share my latest demo that's focused on documentary work instead of my fiction work, and I can explain why to students tired of not finding the truth in fiction. Thus the message, find the truth in your characters and study documentaries to help guide, something like that. So I'm excited to hear him talk more about that position. And joke, here we go. There he is, Jesse James Miller. Before I show even more of your footage, I showed just the first 30 seconds of your IMDb reel. I figured, if we had 6 minutes, we wanted to use talking to you, but I will send you all the link to the reel on Jesse's website. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for making time to join us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, there's so many faces. Oh my God.
Yeah. You know how to put it into gallery view so you can see everybody?
Yeah. I've been working nonstop on Zoom, so.
Yeah, I figured. Okay. Well, I just got a chance to talk you up a little bit, and we read your bio and watched some clips. And no, sir, he didn't direct Wonder Woman. He directed a documentary about the guy who invented, or the people who invented Wonder Woman. So we'll get that out of the way before they saw the clips of Wonder Woman. They're like, what? Wait.
Yeah. Well, close, but not that close.
So Jesse, you're the first person who's focused on both directing and content creation that we've had as one of our Friday Decision Maker series guests. So I'm really excited to have you come in and talk about what that role looks like for you. Because there are people here with very mixed backgrounds. Like we have young folks and adults. We have folks who have professional film and TV credits and folks who are just starting out. Can you start by just talking a little bit about your life as a director and maker of things, and what that work looks like for you?
Sure. You hear my child in the background. It's my 7-year-old yelling. I've had quite a strange career, to be quite honest. I've been an indie filmmaker since 1996 and managed to sort of eke out a living throughout the years. But I've also, the reason it's strange is because I go between documentary and fiction, which drove my agents crazy for many years. Because they want to sort of put you in a box and then sell you as that box, and that's sort of how the industry works.
I think all actors, at least the ones who are auditioning professionally, will be familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. We're all in the same boat with that. They want to do that to writers, directors. Oh, you wrote a horror film, oh, but you don't do horror, right? So it sort of plagues you wherever you go. So I've sort of just sort of ignored it, to be quite honest. And I guess it's paid dividends. I've done 12 feature films, and not one of them is the same. Early on, I was able to do a script that I wrote called Becoming Redwood, which was about my life, and it took me about 14 years to make, and so that was sort of the big push. But since then, I've been doing MOWs, I've been doing feature films that I've written, I've been doing feature documentaries on famous people, etc. So I've been quite blessed to have a variety of tools in the bag. But I am married to an actor, so I'm very familiar with that life and all the challenges that it brings, and all the greatness that it gives to the actor as well. Go ahead, Mike.
I want to make sure that you get a chance to finish your thought. The very super quick breakdown that I usually give in my industry lessons is, producers are in charge of the money, the director's in charge of the story, casting director's in charge of the auditions, etc. And so having you talk a little bit about the role of the director, and
Yeah.
especially because when you're working, you're in charge of even more aspects of the story, than maybe like a hired gun director would be.
Yeah, well, it depends on what Michael's saying is really true. It depends on what your job description is. The reason I became a writer was because I want to have control over what was being done to my work. I've worked as just a hired gun as well, which is a completely different experience, especially on MOWs. When you go into the room for an audition, most of the directors don't have, we have say, but we don't really have the final say, which is always very frustrating for a filmmaker. So usually that's a producer-driven medium. Documentary is completely different. It's a wonderful kind of creative force that takes years and years to make. So it's a completely different thing, but it's completely driven by directors. And the feature film world is a little bit different too. It depends on if it's an indie feature. Usually the indie features are powered by the director, because usually we write the stuff that we're directing. But depends on how much money is involved, really. Once you get up into the $5 to $10 million features, it changes. The kind of producers get involved more often. Executive producers have more power, etc. So, those are the three areas I've worked in. I've never done episodic because that's another animal. It takes a long time to get into episodic. I've shadowed on shows before, but it takes years and years to get into that. But that's really a crew-driven medium, meaning that the DPs really have a lot of, they don't want the director to get in the way because it's already been made. So you just sort of say a couple things and then sit in your chair. So does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. For those of you who don't know, DP is a director of photography. MOW is a movie of the week, or like a one-off movie, typically for traditionally for cable, but now for anybody. And hired gun, if you're not familiar with the reference, somebody who's like hired for, brought into an existing project, to direct it, as opposed to somebody who's been involved with the creative process from the beginning.
Yeah, you're just working for money.
And so you said in your email that one of the reasons that you're excited about documentary right now is because of the truth that's in it, and that you were having trouble finding like the truth in fiction that you wanted. I feel like that's a clue into what gets you excited as a director, and I think that that's really relevant for actors to hear, is what are directors excited about, and specifically, what are you excited about?
Yeah, well, it's taken me a long time to get to this point in my career where I finally decided that truth was the most important thing. And what I mean by that is that nothing to take away from fictional work, because it's beautiful, and when it's done right, it's probably the most enjoyable thing I've done. But I found in my documentary work just more, well, you're engaging with real people, which is obvious, but as a filmmaker, you're not playing as many tricks. You're not playing make believe, which is a harsh way of putting it, but it's sort of the truth. So when I do go into fiction now, which I just gave a workshop about, I just sort of implored the person looking at that character and just finding the truth of the inner truth of what that character, how it works, how it breathes, how it lives, and then just go with that as your basis. I don't know if that makes much sense, but
so it sounds like it's a felt sense, like you're watching and listening to an actor, either in an audition or on a tape, and there's something about it that just sort of.
Well, yeah, it's even in your script work where you have your lines, but you need to make up your own decisions of what those lines mean to you. In documentary work, I think it's great for actors to watch documentaries because you're seeing the unfiltered person right in front of you. Like, I don't know if anybody's seen that. What's that show on Netflix that just came out with the breeder, the zoo guy, lion guy?
The Titan, is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a great example of how crazy people really are.
Mm-hmm.
And it can give you kind of more rein to go into areas as an actor in a scripted world when you kind of look at these characters, and they're real characters. Capturing the Friedmans was an early documentary that's very disturbing, but was the first time where I went, wow, that this person is real. It's not written, so I don't know if I'm making much sense. It's more of a kind of choice that I've made recently. I'm completely blessed with the level of documentaries that I'm working at. So that's a separate conversation. But I think there's a real correlation between fiction and nonfiction, and you can learn from both, really.
Yeah, I mean that sounds that's something that we haven't talked about much here, and I think it's a great idea. For people to round out their experience, not just by looking at fictional stories, but by looking at the depth and oddness, and individuality of people.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be odd. I mean, I did a film on Robbie Knievel, who is Evel Knievel's son, who was overshadowed by his father, and he was completely damaged goods. But there are so many nuances in his character, and that came out in the filming of it, that really was something organic. I think that unfortunately, fiction work is you're relying on how good the writing is.
Of course.
Right? So the trick is to, what do you do when you get something that's not really written well, which happens a lot these days because these scripts that are being made for MOW world are made in 2 weeks. Some are written in 2-3 weeks. So how do you make something that's poorly written work? And that's really the job of the actor.
And if you as a director are working with an actor who is struggling with that, if you're trying to help facilitate that, what does that look like? For those people here who haven't had a chance to work with a director on set.
Well, I mean, I think you should always feel free to tell the director that it's not making sense to you. I think you need to try and make it work at first, but if it's something that you just, because the problem, it depends, getting back to what I said earlier about MOWs or episodic, depends on who has the power on set to change a line, really. But so you can't go out of your way and start just changing stuff out of nowhere. But I think there is a real, what's the right way of putting it? A real relationship between actor and director that is a deep bond of making sure that the words come out right. So when you do have a problem with the line and you don't understand the backstory, then hopefully you have rehearsal time. And if you don't, then you can always go up to your director before and just say, hey, like, what do you interpret this line being? What does this mean to you? So you should never be afraid of that. I love working with actors that way because it's just such a organic moment. And you can make something that looks and sounds wrong work. You just don't want to leave it up to the editors. That's all.
You mean as a director, you can make something work even if it looks and sounds wrong, but the goal is for the actor to understand it and bring life to it.
Correct. Yeah.
I know that from watching the performances of both students and peers, that it is possible to take even writing that has been done very quickly, and when somebody really finds life to it, suddenly it snaps into sounding like a real person.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
For somebody to take even like fairly flat writing, and bring it to life in a way that I sort of, my not joke in class is that if you do that, then the writer and the other people in the room are like, yes, see, we're geniuses. We like that person gets it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the understanding of the right script is the understanding of proper blocking too. And I don't know if anybody understands what blocking is, but that is dictated by, when you're on set, the lines dictate what your blocking is sometimes. I don't know if you've gotten into that kind of.
We talk about it a lot, especially in terms of using the camera for auditions and for tapes. We haven't talked a lot about blocking on set, but we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you get on set, you're gonna have different experiences with every director. Every director has a different way of blocking, right? And blocking is the art form that speaks to making the scene work and click for camera. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but there's a real the more depth you have in your lines and the more connectivity you have into the work, the easier the blocking is, because essentially your character is going to tell you where that person would move. One really good director to study is Steven Soderbergh, who allows, his blocking technique is just allowing the actors to move around the room the way that they would move, and then he plants his cameras accordingly. But not every director works that way. It's one way I like working, for sure.
You've had a chance to work with and shadow and witness directors in different styles. Is there anything else that you want to say about sort of the different directing styles that actors might run into as somebody who's much more of an expert in that field than we are?
Well, I mean, as actors, you have to be prepared for anything, right? Because there's some directors who, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to make your day, right? Which means that you have to get your 8 pages filmed or captured, or however you want to put it. So there's a pressure on set that's why it's always sort of militaristic in the way it moves, is because it needs to be, if you don't get your 8 pages, then you owe them for the next day, and that accumulates, and then budgets and stuff are affected. So that's where you'll find some stressful kind of moments with the director just saying, like, just say your line, you know, like what they're actually saying is, I got to move on. We can't ponder here. So being off book is probably the most. I've been in situations where the actor came to set not off book, which is shocking. But that's your biggest job, is to be off book and be prepared. No matter how many lines you have, even if you don't have a line, it's still being prepared. Is you're in the machine that's trying to make this thing work, and there's a lot of money on the line usually, which you don't see, but it's the truth. Like my documentary days that I just did, the punk doc series, it was like anywhere between $20,000 to $40,000 a day. So it's not much for fictional, but for doc, it was extremely important that day, you know, came off well and worked, you know.
So that I'm not taking up all the airspace, you know, with my questions. How do you feel about opening up to questions from everybody else?
Yeah, sure.
Great. You know, so remember that in the participants window, you'll find a little raise hand button, and that's the easiest for us, because then you don't have to stay there, you know, waving your arms in the air, you know, and a little, you know, blue hand will appear over top of your picture or image, and I'll be like, aha, this person has a question. You know, and if nobody has questions, I'll just keep asking Jesse questions. You know, I'm happy to do that. But now that we've got, you know, a real live director, you know, here to talk to, who has a range of experience, and you've heard him talk about his preferences and what he likes, what do you want to know? You know, and it doesn't have to be directly related to any of the things that we've just talked about. Okay, I'm gonna give another 10 seconds and then I'll ask him another question. But if one of you wants to jump in, that's even better. Something that has come up, Jesse, and that I've talked about, you know, from my perspective as an actor and a teacher, but I would love to hear you address as a director, you know, is the difference between the way that you would interact with, or your expectations of, you know, an actor who is, and I mean, fiction is mostly what, you know, we've been talking about here. You know, so if we were sort of talking about that in the world of fiction, the difference between the way you would interact with, or the expectations you would have for one of the leads in the show, you know, and for somebody who's there just for a single day, a single scene, a single line.
That's a good question. I think the person who's there for just one day with a single line is just as important, because I've seen it happen where that person can't get their line out, and you know, it impact the schedule for the day, and that's just going back to the reality of the business. So whenever somebody has a line, I make sure that I talk to them first, and we talk about the line, and we prep it just like we would prep a lead in a show, because it's as important. In my world, it's just as important. Because especially, like, you ever watch those movies where that one line comes out and it's like, what? That didn't work at all. And it's just one line. So one line can ruin your movie for sure.
Thanks. Linda's got a question here. Linda, you just have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. So what would be your sort of perfect actor one what you love to see actors doing, and then also maybe during the audition process or the work process, and what would you wish they would just knock it off, like stop, please stop, like generally speaking.
I don't really, I mean, it's a good question. I think that, to be honest, anybody who's just trying to drive for the truth of the scene, I dislike when people are just, what I guess the right way to put it is, they've already cemented in their mind what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And then when you get on set, you need to augment it a bit, even in blocking or whatever it is, or the tone of the line. They're not able to do it because they're either afraid or they're just like set in their ways. It's a trust fact. What we're talking about is trust across the board. I mean, actors and directors, it's all about trust. No matter if you have one line or you're the lead. I don't know if that answered your question.
Great. Yvette.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
I was sort of wondering, and I'm often wondering this, are you open to self-submissions? Do you already have, I mean, with documentary, you're going to have people that you're interviewing, obviously, but do you ever use Voiceover for your documentaries, and do you take submissions through that? Does everything go through a casting director? How do you prefer to sort of handle that part of it?
Well, it's a good question. Most depends again on what genre you're in. MOW is all based on casting directors. My last indie feature I did, we didn't cast, we didn't have auditions for it. I just cast it through people that I knew or had submitted to me throughout the years. People submit to me all the time, and for actors and also DPs and sound people and all kinds of people. So I would just, I mean, if you see something that you like a posting, I don't know, Michael, if you have access to the, what are they called, the postings of the week? I don't know.
We don't.
You don't have anything like that?
Breakdowns.
We
Yeah,
don't
breakdowns,
really
sorry.
get the breakdown unless
brain
your
stopped there.
agent, yeah, unless your agent.
There
thinks
is a way of getting
he-
breakdowns, but I've had people all over the world look at my work and contact me and just say, hey, in the future, you know, can you think of me for this, this, and this? And I always do. I kind of applaud that kind of. That's how I was when I was coming up. You know, it's sort of. You know.
Okay, thank you. I guess you'll be getting an email from me.
Okay.
Jesse, can you, you said that you get those all the time. Can you talk about what makes one better than the others? You know, because I have never heard somebody on your end of things talk about, you know, the difference between like an intrusive or annoying self-submission and one that's like, oh, this person is clearly a professional and good for them for, you know, being genuinely interested in my project.
That's another good question. I think it's really doing your homework, really. Like when I used to do it, I would go after a filmmaker that I admired and I'd know all their work, and I would, you know, sort of ask the questions that I wanted to ask based on having the knowledge of where they were coming from. So I guess what I'm saying is I would applaud people who actually know, you know, what that, like watching the demo or knowing the IMDb or picking out an actor that you like that I've worked with, etc. Just doing your homework a bit before you reach out, because it's pretty apparent the people who have done that and the people who haven't. You know, it's really hard to give somebody energy that is like all about themselves all the time, which might not make sense, but that's how I feel about it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, if somebody's approaching you directly, that's more of a relationship building style, you know, and you can tell the people who have put in the time to care about you and your work. Nobody likes to be spammed.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also there's people who have heavy duty resumes and demo reels themselves that share them with me, and I love their work. Or I've worked with the same people for 15 years, so it's hard to get different looks in. But I've also pushed forward some people that come to me to other people, so that's always another way of. There's lots of short films that I don't. Right now, it's tough out there right now, but with the COVID, but lots of short people. Lots of short films have come my way that I don't want to do, but I find a young filmmaker that wants to do it, and say, hey, Christina just emailed me. What do you think of her? That does happen, so it's not a waste of time.
Great. We're just a smidge after 4 o'clock. Does anybody have a last burning question for Jesse? Okay. Well, maybe as somebody who you said that your wife is an actress, so you've had lots of time like they're not like supporting another human who's doing this thing. Any final encouragement for the folks here who are acting and want to stick with this long term?
I would just say do it because you love it, because that will get you through the hard times, because there's going to be hard times and there's going to be good times, and just keep on studying, studying with Michael, studying with people in town. There's tons of super talented teachers in Vancouver and so many talented filmmakers in BC, and I'm completely awestruck by the work that's being done in this province, in this country, that it's really amazing. So yeah, just do it because you love it, because that's why we're here.
Thanks, Jesse. That's a fantastic spot to end on. Thank you again for making time to join us today.
No problem. Anytime, guys.
Okay, y'all can unmute yourselves now if you want to say bye to Jesse before he goes.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Michael Bean.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, Friday. Have a great weekend.
You too.